All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and wanting to kind of learn a little bit more about us. My name is Kutan Ayata. I'm an associate professor here at AUD, also serve as the vice chair of the department. And in that capacity, I direct the Master of Architecture program as well. I have a private practice called Young and Ayata, where I continue the practice and try to bring kind of experience gained in that into my academic research as well as teaching. As our chair Mariana Ibanez mentioned, kind of the place where we're located with all its potentials and challenges are centrally important to one's quest in studying architecture. As someone who's living in the city as a citizen, someone who's attending school and potentially working after graduation, the sensibilities gained in being in an environment in direct relationship to the exchanges that you have in an academic setting really foundationally form your sensibilities as a designer, as an architect. And the city becomes your laboratory. For us, the laboratory is LA. For us, the laboratory is the region around LA, the ecology it's situated in. LA is the end of the Western world on one hand, and it's part of the Pacific Rim. We're able to look multiple directions from where we stand, but we're also at the forefront of the climate change. We are not in a refuge situation. The change is felt drastically in our ecologies through wildfires and droughts. We do feel its injustices within the way the city organized. These challenges, these pressures, these opportunities are the very contexts that through which you begin to study architecture in collaboration with your educators. As also mentioned before, this is a collaborative kind of process for our students. You come, half of you as kind of students with prior architecture education, and some of you without any architecture education. And this effort in studio-based learning happens through peer-to-peer collaboration, peer-to-peer learning, and through that, you also kind of engage us in a way where our knowledge passes on to you, to our experiences in both teaching and practice, and your kind of reaction to the input that we give to you as a productive, recursive feedback loop. And it requires a kind of a generosity that we look in all our applicants, all our students, to recognize we're in this kind of collectively together to push architectural knowledge and the discipline forward. The Master of Architecture program, like in many other places, lives as a 3-year sequence. Those of you who don't know, we are in a quarter setup, meaning we have 10 to 11 week-long quarters as fall, winter, and spring. And the program is organized as 2 main parts. The first 2 years we call as more foundational core, and the last year is the advanced topics here, where you begin to get into more elective courses to pursue your own individual interest, whereas the first 2 years are kind of more commonly set up teams around building foundational knowledge. Like every studio-based kind of education, studio is at the core of our mission and structure of the pedagogy as well. The advantage of being in a quarter is that we can combine some of the quarters to build kind of longer studios. We can stay on a quarter where we rapidly move through kind of topics. We can build 2-quarter-long studios to stay on the problems a little longer. In the case of a research studio, which is really the kind of important aspect of the MARC program here, where we stand out from other programs, it's a 3-quarter-long effort in the 3rd year, where we go through two sets of seminars and a studio component in the spring semester. But the first 2 years are a sequence of studios that kind of get you ready for the third year, in which you'll be able to kind of freely select and figure out independent trajectories in terms of your interest within the discipline and discourse of architecture. We have a series of architectural mediation courses in the first year, which run parallel to the studio, giving you skill sets, but also helping you understand kind of significant and critical histories, theories, and trajectories in architectural media, getting you ready to kind of express and insert your agency in the studio projects that you take on. There are a series of technical courses that help you kind of engage building structures in terms of the environment, structures, construction. Those come mostly in the first 2 years, building you up towards the comprehensive design studio that happens in the later part of the second year. And a set of electives that continue into the third year also gives you an opportunity to engage technical topics within an elective seminar setting. We have 5 history and theory courses. 2 of them are required. The 3 of them are electives. These topics kind of change from year to year, but they engage pre-modern histories, housing in 19th, 20th century, sub-Saharan urbanization, and many more topics that begin to kind of cycle depending on current pressures on the culture. And lastly, as you move into your kind of later part of the curriculum, you begin to kind of pick your electives to engage in smaller, shorter, more concentrated design kind of exercises outside of the studio setting, giving you kind of a far broader range of possibilities of expression and exploration. I'm going to take you through kind of sample of student works through these nine-quarter sequence. So kind of begin to get a sense of our approach as a full collective body of faculty through the student work that is produced at school. One thing that should be said is, as I mentioned earlier, we are at the forefront of climate change, and that infiltrates directly into the way the curriculum is structured, especially the core curriculum is structured. And you'll feel increasingly through kind of scale that increases and the complexity that increases in the projects, one begins to kind of address the reality of climate change from different trajectories. This can be kind of explored in the kind of typologies that negotiate soft climates, thinking spatiality between inside and outside. This can be at the scale of infrastructure that deals with the water supply into the city. That could be dealt with housing, thinking about how density and social injustice in context of environmental conditions within the city affects typology. So you'll be able to kind of pinpoint and see examples in which how this reality enters curriculum directly and in return hopefully positions you to take on larger questions into the third year. So we'll start with the introductory studio. What's at the core of the AUD curriculum is the fact that we, as architects, you know, aside from putting buildings forward as a practice, on our daily labor, we do many other things. We draw, sketch, render, model, prototype, program, talk to one another, write text, animate, debate, lecture, and teach. These are ways of kind of translating, transferring, mediating architectural thought, architectural imaginary to others. And what we want you to be through this program to really become experts in mediation. It's one thing to be able to kind of have the technical expertise that is required to become an architect, go out and practice and realize buildings. It's another one to communicate the very ideas that speak to the, hopefully, to the optimistic reality of the future, and how this is all kind of communicated to very different constituencies, through variety of media that's available to architects. So, but what is the media that we engage? There is no hierarchy, let's say, in the way we look at this, whether things are physical, digital, analog, scripted, primitive, or contemporary. We see really no difference in any one of these. A lot of the innovation really happens in translation from one media to the other. So during your time here at AUD, yes, you will cut things with scissors and X-Acto knives, your mouse and sketches on paper. You'll use your phone to scan things. You'll 3D print, use CNC mill. You will engage all kinds of media that will require you to move from one to the other. And that directly comes into the foundational building stone of the introductory studio, where you start from abstracting set of found object, let's say drawings, to kind of articulating them through abstraction into other kinds of geometric structures, to physically made paper models, and begin to produce ideas through abstraction towards a proto-architectural potentials. What I mean by proto-architectural is things that are not quite yet architecture, meaning they don't have necessarily architectural functions or kind of properties like buildings, but they begin to suggest one. In order to get in front of any kind of bias or preconception that one might have what architecture is, we ask the question what architecture can be. So kind of walking through a set of translationary exercises, which begins to move from one data input to another towards something that begins to suggest architecture, which then is kind of appropriated for architectural project, in this case, for a plan and a ceiling plan, which begins to negotiate some kind of a space in between, resulting in a pavilion project situated in a variety of different sites. These inevitably become architectural propositions where one begins to understand scale, organization, and begins to really kind of develop skills in translating from one medium to the other, establishing the foundations of architectural language. These are kind of excessively perhaps exhausted studies in the first quarter with a very steep learning curve. But it's always kind of amazing to see how constituents without architecture backgrounds and the ones with begin to kind of produce work that is equally perhaps original and different than the ones we assume to be architectural from the get-go. In the winter, in 412, what we call the building design studio, we explore this climactic situation that in a kind of climate we feel in Los Angeles, where in between kind of zones are possible, where the buffer between inside and outside is experienced and understood to be an expanded region in a typology of an arboretum, meaning a building not only for people, for their comfort in terms of the environment, as they transition from public space to kind of semi-public space as an institution, but also for plant life, where different temperatures and requirements require their kind of well-being, nourishment, growth in the context of human observation. So there's kind of a transition from, let's say, to natural to the artificial in terms of the environment, and how architecturally and spatially we begin to manage that. In parallel to that, there's kind of a study of structure as a device to organize how architectural intervention can develop. So these series of projects, you begin to develop skill set where geometry, surface, and structure begin to kind of coalesce and begin to produce drawings that are more measurable, less abstract, structures that begin to perform, environments that begin to not only deal with the abstraction of, let's say, materiality that begins to suggest form, but within that formal development, atmospheres and regulated environmental controls are begin to perform. This is also the semester where you begin to kind of get a deeper understanding on what it means to work through section, what it means to kind of modulate structures, understand system, and begin to think about assemblies in terms of how tectonically these systems begin to come together. Something is incredibly pressing in the context of Los Angeles, and it's the endless carpet. Los Angeles fabric is made mostly out of single-family homes. This is an incredibly unsustainable reality that we live with. The kind of research that happens at school, and I think that's very critical to understand, is very tied directly to the kind of real context of the city. One example here is the research that is done at City Lab usually is tested at design proposals in the studios at school, then it's communicated to the city agencies, then can go to the state and become legislation. One such legislation is called SB 9, which is the additional dwelling units now being proposed and built in the backyards of single-family owner lots towards densifying the city in place rather than densifying it through towers that really only serve to kind of produce moments in a very large carpet that really make any effect in producing real density. So just to kind of reiterate, the kind of ideas that are developed in studio can have real life implications through the think tank and in the way it kind of finds life beyond the bounds of the academic space that we all engage in. In the housing studio, we directly engage the density problem of Los Angeles and challenge the single lot family houses to come up with other housing models that invent typology. This could be shared housing, co-housing, generational housing, housing that has other communal spaces and public portions that begin to really produce other kind of fabric conditions within the city that is new to Los Angeles. Examined, of course, with the understanding of the scale, domestic scale of the plan and how these adjacencies can happen, not only in plan, but also in section to transform the city fabric one block at a time. Students here collectively work on different kind of typological prototypes, but the goal is to like really come up with a vision where we can collectively articulate a different kind of city through the reinvention of housing typologies, which really defines the nature of every block in the city. As I mentioned earlier, parallel to the studio, there's a mediation series that runs through the first 3 quarters in the first year. Here, you're really learning in terms of kind of drawing, modeling, articulating, kind of imaging, learning the basics of how to speak architecture in visual terms, and how to get kind of initial architectural expressions that you might have mentally out into the world through the way you draw, through the way you model, through the way you image, through the way you challenge some of the norms and conventions in which architecture discipline has registered certain information. In this case, challenging the notion of plans, how they're imagined, what other possibilities are there, etc. We take on axonometrics in one of the modules here to really think notation and depth without rendering, how to kind of think about rendering differently from rendering engines, but to think of it in the context of architectural photography, how constructed images could serve a different way of considering how one might begin to render future reality of projects, getting into questions of episodic kind of descriptions of buildings, materiality, mood, etc., moving away from the abstraction of line work into the world of pixels where reality can be sensed through the images that you produce. And as the kind of sequence advances, you begin to get into dynamic modeling, simulation, other media that begins to give advanced skills and other forms of expression as advanced designers. Into the second year, the scale jumps up. In the fall of the second year, you take on this very crucial problem that pressures the city. For those of you who might not know, LA receives its water from 400 miles away from the Colorado River. It is made to travel over terrain through channels, through mechanical pumps, moving up and down through a long journey, and finally it comes into reservoirs like this, where the city kind of hosts its water and its lifeline. Um, but recently, this also has been banned because of EPA's requirements that the pollution that contaminates this water is deemed not to be healthy to drink. So the city has moved into closed system reservoirs where they're constructing kind of storage mechanisms like this. So the students, through a variety of kind of scale and intervention, really look into kind of the scale of infrastructure that deals with water collection and distribution in the city, and the public interface LA Department of Water and Electricity kind of envisions with its citizens. So students design visitor education center in relationship to these reservoirs that are buried under landscapes, and really define kind of strategies through a set of images and their translations into actual architectural and infrastructural engagements in the way its awareness is raised at a very large scale. The work at this studio is much larger in scale. It deals with urban implications of infrastructure, landscape, and architecture, and in the way they intersect, and hopes to give you kind of a awareness as a designer about kind of lifelines, infrastructures, and systems that begin to support the city, but also engage them directly to bring them to a kind of engagement with the public through the projects that you design. These representations require a different kind of approach in the way they're drawn, they're understood. So if your first quarter studio was one where you dealt with a proto-architectural scale, which is very small, the scale asks you to kind of really zoom out and engage the city through different means of representational strategies. Where the 2-year course sequence really kind of culminates is a 2-quarter combined studio, which we call Major Building and Comprehensive Design Studio. For the last 3 years, we've been running this studio under the kind of mandate of thinking through building with existing buildings. It's a fact that your generation of architects in the context of climate change are going to work directly with the existing building stock with the embedded carbon held within them to imagine alternative features. This is not only a numerical problem of meeting certain numbers. This requires for this paradigm to define its aesthetics and its discourse. So this project not only teaches you and engages you and expects you to kind of work with an existing building, but it hopes to push the boundaries of what it means to build and think in terms of adaptive reuse, not only programmatically, but materially, aesthetically, etc. So in this studio, we're stimulating architectural practice. You're collaborating with outside consultants, structural engineers, environmental engineers, facade consultants, to really understand everything about the building that you're designing, about the acts you're performing, about the things you're assembling, understand structural systems, assembly, facade systems, layering, not only kind of making sure that you're kind of comprehensively kind of solving the building problem, but you're also comprehensively representing through variety of media the complexities and potentials of the project. So you might be kind of delving into really articulating the structures, understanding how long spans and cantilevers will work. You might get into more formally complex structures, but all of these kind of examined as parts and close-up, since it's a two-quarter studio, will allow us, it allows us to kind of the time frame to kind of stay on the problem and examine. You will develop detailed drawings, wall sections. If you're really into kind of materiality and tactility of a project, you'll be asked to kind of render those, really give us a sense of the qualities that you're imagining. So it's a studio where you're really diving deep and really working hard to produce a highly resolved architectural project, which is also expected to be provocative. This work is a collaborative effort with the faculty, with the consultant. We do have set of workshops where we collectively kind of look all the work and evaluate it. The drawings get a little bit more measured, a little bit more technical. They get a little bit more resolved. They begin to reflect suggestions of assembly and understanding of scale, things like insulation, performance, etc., all begin to participate. And you're expected to really kind of demonstrate it in the greatest detail possible. So your hands are not only kind of engaged with the mouse in the digital world, but you're kind of making models like this and getting really into nitty-gritty of how really you would think about assembling a building at this very scale towards a very high resolution, understanding set of consequences in terms of decision making, in terms of assembly, structure, environmental systems, etc. How to be inventive in a domain of technical exploration. We don't expect you to become technical experts through this process. We actually want you to be kind of technically knowledgeable thinkers that still produce innovative and provocative projects, yet achieve a very high resolution with these projects. So you'll make models like this where you're in charge and accountable for all aspects of the project. Ultimately, though, these things need to look like kind of buildings with qualities apart from their assemblies and details. So we care very much about the provocations they still suggest in the real world and how they're situated and how they're experienced in relationship to the other realities that define their context. This marks the end of the second year. Third year is where you begin to get into advanced topic studios, where you're given options, presented with options, and a lottery where you'll be able to kind of pick the things to which you might be gravitated towards. These are highly varying topics that range from small scale residential projects to city design. These are also studios which will potentially give you opportunities to travel to other locations. This semester, Professor Hulich's studio will be traveling to Italy. Hitoshi Abe's research studio usually travels to Japan. Last year, Hede Robert's research studio traveled to Denmark. So there's always something a little different and free and elective in the third year, which you can kind of experiment with, both in the studio setting and the electives. I'm gonna move through a set of kind of studio images without getting really into what the studios are about, but just to give you a range of explorations that begin to kind of take on into very varying trajectories in terms of exploration. Professor Neil Denari's studios always engage questions of representation and highly rigorous geometry in their resolution, immaculate drawings and images, changing its kind of media requirements from project to project, depending on the scale that it's engaging. Professor Hulich's recent studios, especially the ones that are exploring the countryside in Europe, thinking alternative ways of using, reappropriating really old buildings, and how new aesthetics can emerge from engaging them in maybe unexpected ways. In some of my studios, we explore kind of architecture, the way it's presented through indirect mediums. So what you're kind of always looking is something that's presented in the world. We usually kind of engage realism held within photography and how photography is presented in different settings as a way to access the work. Always kind of trying to create the sense that you are already sharing the world with the vision that's being presented to you. On the total end of abstraction, we had studios that engage potentials of metaverse, how to imagine spatiality and kind of exchange within the way metaverse might be structured, how different diagrams, different systems within that world might articulate different timescales, different connectivities and potentials. And within that, kind of really using architectural knowledge that you learned in the first 2 years, but exploring towards not necessarily making buildings in the physical realm, but really exploring the potential of the virtual space. Um, Questions about CLT, mass timber, and how new prototypes and building assemblies might emerge through the transformation of building industry towards more responsible materialities. Experiments in other materialities at a small scale, how the knowledge and plan that's been explored, perhaps early in mediation, comes back into play in articulating kind of radically different architectural organizations, how that manifests in a different kind of media to express three-dimensionality and tectonics. And this kind of play between digital, physical, analog, virtual, handmade, machine-made. These are things we engage in the third year in every single course. So the foundation that is given to you is fully utilized regardless of the shifts in topic and the territories of the project and the questions that the projects take on. The kind of I guess benchmark studio structure that we have, as opposed to thesis that some other institutions might have, is the research studio. We are a public research university. Our mandate is to produce research for the public. And every third year student participates in a research studio, in a research effort brought forward by a faculty. You are presented by 4 options depending on the class size. And the faculty will present you with a topic, and you'll end up, in the one of your choice. And collectively, as a group of 10, 12 students, really develop a response to the brief that you're given. And these topics, again, range in scale and scope. In the case of Jason Payne here, for many years, Jason Payne has been working on Owens Lake. It's the biggest kind of dried lake, an environmental disaster and source of pollution in the US that's being remediated for the last 20 years. It's an extremely bizarre environment to consider kind of an architectural landscape intervention. But that's at this point almost 90% artificially maintained to be kind of made non-toxic. So it's kind of a effort in finding a place to architects to have a kind of voice and say in an environmental disaster that is made by us and contribute to the kind of efforts in its remediation through architectural and spatial thinking. It involves model making, it involves imagery. In other examples, you might get into projects very indirectly. This is another research studio of mine where we're looking into kind of future reality of synthetic protein and what that might mean culturally to kind of understood by different cuisines. What might be the future of such preparation environments where you're no longer dealing with organic proteins. What might be the kind of public interface of these environments? So in some way, asking questions for which we don't necessarily have answers, but through speculation and research come to certain provocative outcomes through architecture in some cases, through images in other cases, through writing in some other cases, but always kind of maintaining a speculative kind of approach to what research means. In this case, looking at adaptive reuse of kind of abandoned future film studios, how that can be part of a urban realm, how they could kind of participate in future urbanity of the city. Thinking about very large scale problems of manufacturing and production that lives on a line from the harbor of LA to the lines in Nevada desert, how that translation happens. The research studios can find different formats, very free formats of exploration. Sometimes it's an installation that you can occupy. Sometimes it's an exhibition that you can kind of dive in and spend a lot of time with. The format of these always change from studio to studio, from instructor to instructor. Sometimes it's the form of a book. In Professor Hitoshi Abe's case, looking into resilience in the context of wildfires, understanding the history, the kind of radical change in the recent years in terms of the amounts of fires we have started to experience in California and around LA, and developing a sense of understanding of prevailing winds, topography, how to build in the face of such reality, and how to think about kind of typologies that might be more resilient in the face of this kind of pressure result of climate change. In the case of Professor Denari, looking at tower typologies and how they're examined, sometimes it's collected in a book, but also presented as an exhibition. That is all to say there is a broad range of scales and interest in the research studios that kind of garners everybody's particular interest. And there is kind of a collective act of really focusing on one problem to produce new form of knowledge through the studio. And that's kind of central to your third year effort. And the last thing I will cover here is the elective seminars. And this is where really a lot of fun happens. You get into in all kinds of fabrications, all kinds of kind of experiments. It's kind of architecture without capital A. The outcome is not necessarily always buildings and architecture, but things and that kind of relate to architectural thinking. We want you to have a sensibility to deal with all kinds of design problems. And seminars are a way of kind of stepping away from, let's say, thinking about buildings and buildings only, but really to think about other kind of constructs, other kind of imaginations one can delve in. From kind of abstracted objects, their renditions. In more technical kind of seminars, you can look into building systems and facade assemblies directly. This one is really experimenting with alternative means of thinking brick and how it might make more novel assemblies if its convention is broken. Thinking about performative walls, producing prototypes, site visits to actual construction sites, learning from architects and builders on site. And there are plenty of interesting buildings that are always under construction in Los Angeles. Kind of pushing the kind of limits of how to world make with AI tools, kind of engaging not only image production tools, but also GANs to kind of train and produce provocative kind of images, engage other scanning media, photogrammetry, kind of building a range of kind of repertoire and the media that you engage to kind of really explore architectural in a much, much broader horizon. This is the end of my presentation. Any questions, of course, should be emailed to here. I know we said, the kind of time says we end at, 6:30. Happy to take questions here from anyone. and you can really ask your questions. You don't have to write it in here. And we can stay here as long as there are questions.
Thank you, Kutan, so
course.
much for going over the EMARC program. I know in a very short period of time, we gave all of you a lot of information, and I will just repeat that there would be many opportunities in the coming months to engage either with staff or with faculty, with leadership, to talk about some of the themes that you heard information about today, or other questions that might have not been addressed. So we're going to be here for a few minutes. Don't feel pressure to ask questions. That's why I wanted to say that there will be more opportunities. But definitely, if you do have them, always happy to get to know you and share more. Kutan, back to you, to the MC role.
Yeah, okay. Kayleen? I hope I said that correctly.
Yes, Kaylin. I thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask about what was the name of the lab I think you mentioned that resulted in policy change in Los
CityLab.
Angeles?
Yeah, CityLab, led by Professor Dana Cuff. And I think Mariana also covered it in her introduction earlier on.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I posted the link for City Lab also in the chat, Kaylin.
Thank you.
Hayden.
Hey, how's it
Hi.
going? Thank
Good.
you for the wonderful presentation. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
of course. Pleasure.
This is maybe a bit more broad, but in the collective brain, or I guess thought of sorts that you all are hoping to cultivate within the cohorts and at UCLA in general, what are some of the characteristics you think that the current faculty and students value most in new community members and community members that are matriculating into the program?
Look, it's a great question. We're 50% international, 50% national. We're 50% with architecture background, 50% from all walks of life. We have ceramic artists, we have people who have biology background, we have people who have finance background. So it's kind of an incredibly mixed group of people. And what's kind of really nice about being a public university is the fact that the education opportunity that is given and earned is absolutely cherished by each member of this community. And I think that lives above all, and everybody understands and kind of cherishes that opportunity, and so do the faculty. I think the commonality amongst faculty is that we're committed to kind of an agency of design that can make a difference in the world, and design comes first. And through that, different trajectories kind of open up. So it's kind of discourse in the making through design, if that makes sense. In terms of the students, their commonality is one of kind of being together in a space to wanting to learn and share their potential with us. Because this is not studio education is not one where the teacher preaches and the student listens. There has to be a feedback loop. In instances where there is no kind of response back and it's one way, the discourse doesn't go anywhere. What we expect and what we hope always happens is that kind of participation by the students and that openness to take in, our openness to take the input from students builds new discourse. So the expectation is to be collaborative. and very, very short word after like a long-winded 2 minutes. But a collaborative spirit is what we're looking for.
No, that's perfect. I appreciate it.
And I loved your questions. I'm gonna add a few words there because this time of the year is very interesting to us in terms of assembling a new cohort for next year. And we always try to make as transparent as possible what the process entails when we put a class together. And we think of it akin to a curatorial process because the group of people that we get applying every year is different. Obviously, there are things that repeat, and Kutan just shared a few sort of statistics. We're always more or less between the 45–50% background, non-background, so on and so forth. There's always sort of new types of characters and backgrounds that we welcome to add diversity of opinion, diversity of backgrounds to the department as a whole. Collaboration for sure, so I'll repeat what Kutan said. But something that we talk with our students often, which I think also falls into the spirit of collaboration, is that when you come to AUD, you're going to learn a lot from your professors, but you're going to learn as much from your fellow students. And that is where those sensibilities, whether if it's technical knowledge, skill building, conceptual frameworks for a project, methodologies, really what we do in the school, while sometimes translates into objects we can, touch and pick up and weight and measure and photograph and mediate and translate into a million different sort of forms of representation and communication. It's really that back and forth between the individual work and the collective work that everybody needs to be, signed up for. So sometimes you go like, okay, but how do you know that somebody has a collaborative spirit when you look at a portfolio or a statement? And I think this is where we all get together and we start sort of getting excited about, imagine these two people working together in one space. What would be the right theme in the studio? It's really, I don't know if I said this in my presentation now, but we understand pedagogy as a live project. And we very much think that every single student is part of that feedback loop. So yeah, I hope that that's something meaningful and useful to Kutan's answer.
No, I appreciate it. You can feel both your enthusiasm on that topic, which was pretty fun to hear. So thank you.
I saw another hand up afterwards, but now I don't see it anymore in my screen.
Feel free to jump in if you do want to ask a question.
Going once, going twice. You can always reach out to Jim with any questions. We're gonna have another, as mentioned, other information sessions and portfolio sessions. Don't miss those out. I mean, ultimately, people who'll be looking at the portfolios are giving you tips about how to make that portfolio. It's a good inside information. Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. I would advise everyone to get very familiar with the institution, just its faculty, because it can really help you articulate if you decide to apply your statement, kind of make it more pointed. It can help you kind of make it to the specifics of what we do here. And all that is really accessible to you through the interface of our website, through faculty projects, through student projects. You'll be able to kind of construct a picture for yourself through which you can establish access to our world. I imagine it's nighttime for some and probably morning time for others.
Yep. Just a quick reminder too, you'll get this information once we're done if you didn't receive it already with Eventbrite, but we have an open studio day coming up November 4th if you happen to be in the LA area. some more info sessions in mid to late November. And the portfolio workshop that Kutan mentioned is also, I think it's November 20th. But you'll get most of that information during when we do a reply to the Eventbrite. Also, we have something new this year, which is going to be some office hours drop-ins with our SAOs and program experts, so that you can have, if you have those very specific questions about where you think you should apply, requirements and prereqs, we're going to have some of those sent out via the same email. So you'll have all that, but just sort of making sure you keep an eye out for it and bookmark it.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night and good morning.